Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on today's episode, it is guaranteed to wake you up because it is the thing that wakes me up every single day. We are talking about coffee. Oh my gosh, I love coffee. Before we get into this episode, before I get into why we are talking about coffee, let me just say, for the record, if you're listening, Starbucks, Tim Hortons, Nescafe, Kicking Horse, the Amazon brand coffee that I drink, all of you amazing coffee retailers, let me just say, thank you, I love you, and I appreciate you. This is going to sound like the craziest thing, but every company I've worked at, I rate their office structure based on how good their coffee machine is, or was at the time, because some of them have unfortunately closed down now, and I wonder what happened to those amazing coffee machines. I'm so concerned about them. Do they have homes? Are they okay? Are they safe? I don't know. I also know that when I used to date guys in university and I would go to their dorm room, I judged them on how good their coffee machine was. Guys, coffee is important. And it's important to anyone who has a busy life, or anyone who doesn't have a busy life, but you just really need that jolt of energy in the morning. And here's the thing. I could do an entire podcast episode talking about my love of coffee. We could talk about beans. We could talk about dark roast. We could talk about iced coffee. We could talk about ice caps, because let me tell you, you Americans, you don't understand the value of a Tim Hortons ice cap. I hope I have Canadians listening so that you can all nod along with me right now and say, yes, and Tim Hortons ice cap is the best way to start any sort of road trip. It is the best thing to have on a lake, on a boat, around a bonfire. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's also horribly bad for you and filled with sugar. But that doesn't matter, because, guys, it's great. So let me just say, flat out, I could talk about coffee for an entire podcast. That's just a true statement. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're not going to talk about my love of coffee. I will try to rein it in. I just spent the first 2 minutes of this podcast talking about it, and I apologize. I promise the rest has everything to do with marketing. Get your pen and paper out, guys, because we are talking about coffee and marketing strategies of these really big coffee brands. Some of the ones I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about Tim Hortons. And again, if you are not a Canadian listener and you don't know what Tim Hortons is, don't worry, I'm going to explain it to you. But we're also talking about Starbucks and Nescafe, and I am going to give you all of the big strategies they use in their marketing campaigns, and we are going to see if there is a way for them to work with your marketing campaigns, because even if you don't sell coffee, even if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, hey, I sell homes, or I sell furniture, or I sell decorative pillows, what would a food or beverage company have anything to teach me? Well, let me tell you, a lot. And we're going to get into all the different ways they can help you. And I'm also going to give you some examples of campaigns that are real. They're happening right now, or they've already happened, using the strategies we talk about. I want to give you guys real examples that are being used and are being used successfully. And they're famous enough that you're like, oh my goodness, I've seen that ad. I was drawn to that company because of that ad. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Something we really like to do on this podcast, the marketing podcast, is explore different industries and take a look into them to see if there are marketing strategies in there that are useful for our companies. And if you have an industry in mind that you want me to explore, or an industry that maybe you're a part of and you want me to talk about that one more and you have ideas, then let me know. I'm so open to listening to your guys' suggestions. And guys, I take your suggestions. People weren't loving the news segment, so we've taken that out for now. If you love it, if you miss it, we'll put it back in. And I heard last week that people really weren't finding the stats and facts part of this podcast to be interesting or helpful or necessarily valuable to their brand. Like, they didn't really care how many people had bought video games last year. Last time we talked about video games. So I took that part out of today's episode. I want this to benefit you, but the only way I can know if it's benefiting you is if you leave a review down below or you reach out through social media. I will not be offended. I want this to work for you. So please give me your honest feedback, but I will ask, if you're giving feedback, to please subscribe. Subscribing is so important to the podcast. It's how we know we're doing a good job, as silly as that seems. We want to know who's listening, and we want to know why you're listening. So please do not be a stranger. Hit subscribe, and let's start connecting. For now, though, if you're maybe not convinced you should subscribe to the podcast, maybe you're a new listener, maybe you're a long-time listener, and you're like, hey there, Jakewish, I need a little bit more information. I need to be swayed before I subscribe. Why don't we jump into today's episode, and I'll see if I can persuade you. So we're jumping right in, folks. We're going to get right into the nitty-gritty of talking about some coffee marketing strategies that will work for your company. So get your pen and paper out. I'll give you a minute. Take a drink of water. I am drinking my water out of a martini glass because coronavirus, I'm falling apart. I have to record in my home. It's a studio, so all the dishes are dirty, so I'm drinking water out of a martini glass. Okay, was that a long enough break? Do you have your pen and paper out? Good, because we are jumping right in with strategy number 1, content marketing. I can talk about content marketing until the cows come home. It is by far your most valuable tool as a small business, as an entrepreneur, or as someone who is working in the marketing world for a company. If you are the designated marketing coordinator for a company that sells real estate, I've done that. I loved it. If you are the marketing coordinator for someone who sells beer, like a brewery or nail polish or anything, then your ability to create content marketing for them is huge. And that's true in the coffee world as well. And that's where we see a lot of this getting generated, because you might look at a bag of coffee, you might look at a cup of coffee and say, that's it. That's the end of the story. That's all we can do. I'll post 1 million photos of beans on the Instagram and hopefully that will work. Wrong. There is always more you can do. You need to learn how to create content out of your product, even if it seems like, okay, does this really have anything to do with my product anymore? You better believe it does. You just need to find a way to do it. DIY videos, tutorials, behind the scenes, the history of Q&A, photographs of the different types of coffee you can make, photographs of the different coffee drinks you can make, different things you can do with the beans, where the greens are grown, how they're grounded. All these different ideas are all content marketing strategies. So let me just say right now, if you are having problems coming up with content marketing, I have done 1 million podcasts on how you can create content marketing. That is mostly what this show has been. If you want to learn how to do a photo shoot, if you want to learn how to do a video shoot, if you want to learn how to blog or vlog, I've talked about it. So go look back through our old podcast episodes and hopefully that will give you some ideas. All right. Number 2, work on your brand personality. So earlier I mentioned a few of the big hitters in the coffee world. We have Tim Hortons, which is a very, very big Canadian coffee brand. They are by far the main one you go to. Obviously, we have other ones. We're all not just huddling around a Tim Hortons, but Tim Hortons is the biggest. There were 4 in the town I grew up in, all owned by the same person who lived in that town. It is a big franchise, and it is a big part of the Canadian culture. As weird as it sounds, it is. Number 2, we have Starbucks, which is international, one of the biggest coffee giants of the world. And then you have Nescafe, and like I said, Amazon is now making their own coffee. You have Peet's Coffee. You have I live in Seattle, guys. I can get coffee anywhere I want. They're huge. But what is the one thing all of those brands have in common? They sell coffee. That's the only thing they have in common, because they work so hard on their brand personality. They put in the time, the effort, the energy to ensure that Peet's Coffee looks nothing like Starbucks, and that Starbucks looks nothing like Tim Hortons. It is time, it is energy, it is effort, and it is ensuring that you are working on your brand personality so that you just don't get blended in with the rest, so that you can stand on your own and say, no, this is my company. We may do what they do, but we do it differently, and here's how. So right now, if you don't have brand guidelines, if you don't have a strong brand personality, then keep listening to the podcast, keep writing notes, but put a little star next to this one and say, we need to work on this. Guys, we're in the middle of the coronavirus. Now is the perfect time for you to work on your brand personality and ensure that it is so strong that even if something big were to come and push it down, it would survive. It could still stand. So work on that. Work on that hard, because I know you can, because your brand personality, especially if you are a small business, your brand personality is your personality. It's your company. You know it better than anyone else. So work hard. Get in there, because I know your brand personality could be so, so great. Number 3, express that brand on social media. Guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you do not have a social media account for your company, what are you doing? Stop right now. It is so easy. It's freaking free. You need it. Don't think you don't. I've interviewed for so many companies where they're like, we don't have it. We do not think we need it. Who cares about us? Your customers care about you. Your customers are on your social media accounts wondering where you are. So you need to give them what they're looking for and show them that strong brand personality through your social media. And like I said, point number 1 was to create content marketing. And the best way to do that, the best way to have a platform to put all that on, is to have a social media platform. If you have these amazing photographs of your coffee product, you need to post them online. They can't just be posters and billboard campaigns and all this. This is free. This is cheap. This is easy. Get a social media account and start expressing your brand through that. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we have some more marketing strategies for you to try out. So stay tuned, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I will be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on today's episode, we are talking about coffee. That's right, this is a podcast episode that would make the Gilmore Girls happy. So let me preface this. I've done an episode before on Starbucks, and I've talked about the Starbucks marketing campaigns, and we've talked about how they operate within the industry, and we maybe did touch a little bit on some of these other companies. So let me be clear. If you're like, hey, Mackenzie, you've done this before. You've done this episode. Girl, get a new idea. No, this is different. We are talking about how in that industry, they are able to, number one, have these unique brand personalities. And we talked about that before the break as being a very important strategy, because every big coffee giant they are so unique in what they do. Their brands are so unique, and they are so different in the way that they are crafted and in the way that they take care of their product versus their marketing. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about these strategies, and then we have some examples to really show you how your brand personality needs to be different from all the other companies that maybe make the same product as you do. So we're talking about these strategies that will hopefully give your marketing a boost of energy in the same way that coffee gives all of us a boost of energy every single morning. So that is what we are talking about today. And before the break, I gave you so far 3 strategies. We have some more to go over, and then we have examples. But before we get into it, get ready, roll your eyes. You're going to be so mad at me. I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I keep asking you to subscribe, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep asking until you do it. I've had 4 cups of coffee this morning. I'm jazzed up. I'm running around my apartment. It's raining outside. So all I'm doing today is creating podcasts. And I know that. I woke up this morning and I was like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? All day today I'm recording podcasts. So if I am putting in this work, if I am taking your suggestions, if I am producing content for you, then do me the favor and subscribe, because it helps. I'm not going to lie to you. It helps us know who is listening. And if we know who is listening, then we know what type of content to create. Say you're all small business owners, then I should talk about small business marketing more. So this is the type of thing I need to know. And the only way for me to find out is if you subscribe. So let me give you a minute. I'll drink out of my water glass martini. And yeah, I'll just wait for you to subscribe. Okay, enough with the self-promotion here. But guys, come on, I have to do a little marketing myself. Let's jump right back into some more coffee marketing strategies. Number 4, connect with other brands. And when I say connect with other brands, you're all probably like, yes, you've told us to network before. We know, get in touch with our community, work that way. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. When we talk about connecting with another brand in terms of the coffee industry and using that as an example, it's not so much that Tim Hortons and Starbucks are working together, but Tim Hortons is finding companies or charities within Canada that reflect on their brand. A really great example of this is Timbits Hockey, which is a hockey organization in Canada that Tim Hortons pays for, and it allows children who are maybe not as privileged as others the opportunity to play recreational sports. They also do camp day, where they send kids who can't afford to go to camp so that they get to experience that. So all of those charities, you might be thinking they have nothing to do with coffee, and you're right. But they have everything to do with Tim Hortons' brand. Tim Hortons wants you to think they are a family-oriented brand. They want you to believe that they are looking out for your kids, that they are looking out for you. And the way they do that is by connecting with other brands that also do that are sending your kids to camp, that are putting your kids in hockey, that are supporting you. And so once it's in your mind that Tim Hortons is working with those companies, then it's in your mind that Tim Hortons is supporting your family. So you are going to go there when you need coffee, when you need a morning boost, because you're going to say, they're sending my kids to hockey, even if you don't have kids. That is the crazy part, is that I have gone specifically to Tim Hortons on camp day to buy a coffee because I know that money is going to a good cause. And that's crazy because I don't have kids who are going to camp. I just don't. But I support it. I support the brand. I support what they're doing. And so it's important that when you connect with other brands, they don't have to be brands that necessarily do the same thing as you, or something you could combine products with or do a giveaway with, because I know I've talked about that a lot. But in this instance, I am telling you to connect with brands, with organizations, with companies, with influencers who match what you want your brand to be. And that is what I'm talking about. That is what you need to do. So right now, I know you have your pen and paper out. Take it out and make a little list of all the influencers in your area, of all the charities in your area, and of all the other companies in your area that match your brand, that have the same ideals as your brand, the same values as your company. and then start reaching out and start connecting with them. All right, number 5, reward programs. Reward programs are huge in the food industry. I did a whole podcast where we talked about the food industry, more specifically the fast food industry, and rewards programs are so insanely important over there, which is why they're so insanely important in the coffee industry. But what you need to recognize is if you don't sell anything to do with food, beverage, or anything in those industries, rewards programs can still benefit your company greatly. It is so incredibly important that if your customers are coming back to you day in and day out, they are saying, hey, we want more, you're rewarding them. Because eventually they're going to keep coming to you, they're going to keep saying, we want more. But if Starbucks slips in and says, hey Tim Hortons customers, we know they do camp day, but did you know if you buy 5 of our coffees, you get a 6th one for free? And so, if you do that, if you recognize that's going to be a problem, then you need to say, hey, I know Starbucks is doing 6 cups of coffees, get 1 free. We're doing 4 cups of coffees, get 2 free. You need to one-up those rewards programs so that your customers know you value them. You're rewarding them for coming to shop with you. And so after this break, once we're going to go on another break, I hate to tell you, I know, you missed me. But after this break, we're going to talk about examples, and there is one huge reward program in the coffee empire world that is going to blow your freaking mind, this reward program. And if you're Canadian, you probably already know what it is. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to go ahead, we're going to jump off, we're going to go on our break. But then we're going to come back, and I got 3 examples for you of how all of these marketing strategies have helped 3 of the biggest coffee empires in the world. And again, you do not have to sell coffee to benefit from this. You can sell soap. You can sell beer. You can sell pillows. You can sell remote controllers. I don't care. You can benefit. So stay tuned for more of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on today's episode of the podcast, we are talking about coffee. I love coffee. Guys, if the GSMC Podcast Network had an entire podcast dedicated to coffee, I would be on it every single week. Even if they asked me not to be the host of it, they chose a different host. They're getting Ben from the Technology Podcast to host it. I would still be like, hey, Ben, you want me to come on and guest host with you or just talk about my coffee preferences? Because I am a devoted supporter to the coffee empire. I love it. But let me ask you something. Who doesn't? people who have never tried it. Those are usually the people who you meet who are like, oh, I don't drink coffee. And you're like, have you ever had it? And usually they say no. They never got into it in high school. They maybe didn't have a stressful university experience that pushed them into drinking it. But they're missing out. Just know that. If you're listening and you don't drink coffee, you're missing out. I'm not saying you haven't had a stressful life. Maybe you're just better at coping with stress than us coffee addicts are. Oh my gosh, can you tell how much coffee I've had this morning? I just tripped over my words. But yes, coffee, it's important. But you want to know what's more important than coffee? Coffee marketing. I love coffee marketing because in the industry, there really are three big players that when they come out to play, they're playing hard. They're not taking it easy on each other. They're coming up with big, bad, expensive campaigns. Bad isn't good, guys. It was the cool bad. You know what I mean? They're badass kind of thing. I'm sorry for swearing, but that's what these campaigns are. That's how fired up I am about these campaigns. And when they come out to play, we got 3 examples here. They are using those marketing strategies we talked about before the break. So if you are able, maybe you don't have the budget of Starbucks. And the first one we're going to talk about, you're going to be like, hey, guess what? I don't have the budget for that. Don't worry, because you can still use that strategy. You can still create that ad without having that budget, without having those resources. You just need to learn to get creative. And guys, maybe I haven't said this enough. Maybe this needs to be a whole podcast episode. But there are so many different ways to get creative with your marketing and get amazing results. So let's jump in. Let's hear these examples. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can make these examples work for you. So number 1, Nescafe and their collaborations with George Clooney. So George Clooney has been working with Nescafe for years on different ads, often bringing in other famous celebrities such as Danny DeVito to help sell the Nespresso name. These ads have been very successful for the Nespresso brand as they have helped establish themselves as the choice drink for A-list celebrities such as George Clooney. The ads themselves have been viewed a million times on YouTube, giving the brand and George Clooney lots of exposure. The reason that I mentioned that it's giving George Clooney a lot of exposure as well is because not that he needs it. You know, he has the Ocean's movies. He's good. He does not need more exposure. But you want to know what does? His charity that he works with Nespresso. So these ads aren't only beneficial to the Nescafe company. They have agreed to partner with Clooney on his charitable work in the South Sudan. Clooney has stated before that Nespresso and I have shared a commitment to sustainability, most recently helping to rebuild coffee farms in South Sudan. They are an incredibly responsible company, and I am excited to expand my partnership with them into the U.S. Guys, this is a strategy we talked about with working with collaborators, working with partners, reaching out to other companies that are doing a similar thing to you. Because George Clooney and Nescafe are not doing the same thing. They're not both making coffee, but they are doing one thing the same. They're both being super freaking cool all the time. So if Nescafe wanted to have their brand be represented as the luxury coffee, the luxury at home coffee, the live the life of an A-list celebrity, there were millions of celebrities they could have chosen. Why George Clooney? Why did they pick George Clooney? They picked George Clooney because George Clooney is style, baby. He's class, he's elegance, he's James freaking Bond. Even though I don't think he ever played James Bond, you know what I'm getting at. They didn't pick Danny DeVito to be the main sponsor of their coffee empire. And when Danny DeVito was actually brought in on an ad, like I said, George Clooney brings in his friends sometimes, it was only to show that even Danny DeVito could become classy once he started drinking Nespresso. So they wanted to collaborate with him because they knew it would establish themselves as being the classy coffee brand. And George Clooney wanted to work with them because they could give him money for his sustainability projects in South Sudan. So it's a win-win-win. So like I said before, maybe you don't have the budget to hire George Clooney to do your ads, but I guarantee there is a company, there's an influencer, there's an organization that shares the same values, has the same style, has the same idea as your brand. And working with them will just elevate both of you. So reach out, connect. Trust me, they want to connect with you just as much as you want to connect with them. Number 2, this is the big one I was talking about, guys. Get jazzed. Get your pen and paper out because this is the big one. We are talking about Tim Hortons Roll Up the Rim to Win, baby. All right, so I've mentioned it 1,000 times in this podcast. I have mentioned it 1,000,000 times over all the other episodes. I'm Canadian. And Roll Up the Rim to Win has got to be one of the most famous contests, one of the most famous rewards program that has ever happened to any coffee empire. So let's start out there. For those of you non-Canadians, Roll Up the Rim is basically a rewards program mixed with a lottery that the Canadian coffee brand has been hosting every year since 1986. Although the prizes may have changed over the past couple of decades, the idea remains the same. Starting on March 11th and ending in April, Tim Hortons patrons can purchase a hot beverage and have the opportunity to win big prizes just by rolling up the rims of their cups. The prizes range from a free coffee to a new car. The interesting thing about the contest is that it actually started because of Lent, a holiday where people of certain belief systems give up something that they believe to be luxury. To put it very simply, I do not know a lot about Lent. Don't come at me if I did that wrong. That's just sort of the information I found. But the brand Tim Hortons noticed that a lot of people tend to give up coffee during that time. Hence, they hatched the Roll Up the Rim scheme to lure people back in. Guys, that's so freaking smart. It's a little bit evil. It's a little bit evil. But it's so freaking smart. They saw their customers were dipping. They saw their customers were seeing them as something unnecessary, something that they could give up. And they were like, no. We love you guys. You're a part of our Tim Hortons family. Let us reward you. Here's Roll Up the Rim to Win. And then they walked away. And it was amazing. And every year, people get so freaking jazzed about Roll Up the Rim to Win. If you're one of the places in Canada that has the car, that you could win the car there, because not every Tim Hortons location has the car parked out front, but some of them do. So you can win the car at any location, but some of them have this big freaking nice car parked right out front so that when you're going through the drive-thru, you're like, that one's mine. I'm winning it this time. I'm winning it this time. It is 1 in a chance to win. I bought in 5 coffees. This one I'm getting the car. And then you get a free coffee and you want to know? You want to know something? You're still pretty freaking jazzed about it because at least you got a free coffee. Boom. Money well spent. So Tim Hortons got us. They understand. They understand that maybe their product isn't the best. It's definitely gone down over the years. But if I were to be able to get it for free, then I'm getting an extra large. And I'm going to roll up that rim again, too. And maybe get a free donut this time. Maybe I get the free bike. Either way, Tim Hortons knows they got us. They got us. And they're treating us right with Roll Up the Rim. All right, let's move on to example number 3, which is Starbucks and their seasonal drinks. Starbucks, the franchise, owns the holiday seasons. Let's get real. And they are the kings and queens of creating user-generated content. When it comes to the holidays, they have every season on lockdown, with festive drinks, merch, and campaigns waiting in the wings. Even when you thought they couldn't have a festive drink for that holiday, they would just make one up. Does anyone remember the days where October and November were about Thanksgiving and Halloween, and it had nothing to do with pumpkin spice lattes? Well, Starbucks sure turned that around, didn't they? The key to their success is their brand presentation over the quality of the actual product or any of the nutritional value of their food. Why is this important? Because they understand their target demographic doesn't care about the taste of the coffee. They care about the gram, the Instagram. An example of this is that the unicorn frappuccino was freaking disgusting. It had so much sugar and was filled to the brim with calories and fat. But guess what? It looked amazing in photos. It was pink and purple and there's blue colors, and it was what everyone wanted to be posting about. So the end of the story is that Starbucks didn't care if you liked the drink. You could throw it out and they wouldn't care. But they want you to snap a photo of it first and then post it online so that everyone who follows you, even if you only have 20 people following you, they're going to go buy one and do the same thing. And then the 20 people who follow them, and then the 100 people who follow them. It's nonstop. They're creating content from their marketing, and sometimes they don't even have to do anything. They do user-generated content by allowing their target demographic to do the heavy lifting. All they have to do is make a drink that will look pretty on Instagram. Guys, I did a whole freaking episode on Starbucks marketing. I could talk about it till the cows come home. So if you're interested, definitely go check it out. And let me know your thoughts on that one. And let me know your thoughts on this podcast episode. I would love to hear from you. So please subscribe, rate, review, reach out through social media. And I will see you all next time on the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.